I don't know how an organization 10 years ago can be the same organization today. There's just way too much that's happened and changed.
Welcome to Rochester Business Connections, powered by Balbert Marketing, LLC, where I get the chance to chat with Rochester, New York's very best business owners, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders. I am your host, Ben Albert. Don't forget to subscribe, and remember, we don't do advertisements. My fee for this show is simple. If you gain value from the episode, personally share with a friend and explain your favorite part. Let's get started. I am here with Cynthia Woolbright. Cynthia, how are we this morning?
I'm fine. It's a great day, and I'm excited to be sitting here with you talking about the things we're going to talk about.
I'm so excited too. I mean, we just chatted for 15 minutes before this just because we're both really passionate about what you do and how you help people at the Woolbright Group. I want to give you the opportunity to introduce what you do yourself, though. I mean, from a bird's eye view, tell us a little bit what you do at the Woolbright Group, Cynthia.
Well, I founded the Woolbright Group and serve as the founder and the president. And I often get asked, like, "Well, that's pretty good that you run your own business." And I said, "Oh, yeah, it really is. But you know what? Since I work out of my home, I also am the janitor, the trash person. So I mean, there's a lot that goes into that. And I think, though, as a president, it's really keeping a pulse on what's going on in the world of philanthropy in general. And then because I serve different segments of nonprofits, trying to stay abreast, because that's my client base, of what might be happening there. So that is something that's, I think, really significant. And then with my clients, depending on what it is that that we're going to undertake, that also then shapes how I spend my day. And I'm crazy about making sure that with a client that we set a calendar for the project, and that we stick to it, knowing that I always say, I just need to have a plan. And then if we need to change something, I can be perfectly flexible. Mm-hmm. But I really need to have that plan and have the expectations for the client to have of me and me to have of them. And, sure, some things work out differently from time to time, but I try to deliver on what I indicate that I'm going to deliver on.
So let's talk about who you deliver this for. So you're working with nonprofits, and mm-hmm. a lot of people don't understand your space, obviously not nearly as well as you do, or maybe not much at all. So are you serving Rochester? Are you serving the world, the United States? What are you doing for nonprofits? And is there a specific thing that you focus on more than anything else?
Yes. When I started my business, coming from higher education, quite frankly, higher ed was really all I did because of my contacts over the years, because of attending conferences and doing presentations, et cetera, and writing articles for, some of the professional magazines and things like that we have. So that was by and large the biggest chunk of my work. As I had settled more in Rochester, I also then got to know more about the local nonprofits. And so that then has been probably a huge chunk of my business right now is local, or in the greater, geographic area. Mm-hmm. It might be driving an hour some way but in this area, which I really enjoy. I think it's kind of fun to be able to work in my own community, because I feel like not only have I had to keep a promise to the client, I really have to make sure I do that to see the impact in the city, then in the greater area. So I think that's an added benefit when one works in the local area. The areas that I, cover for the most part, higher education, independent and charter schools, social and human services is a big one, mm-hmm. Some faith-based organizations, and also different professional associations have hired me because they're creating a foundation to raise money for their professional organization. So I've been involved in some of those. So those are, probably the more dominant ones that I've done. And with each of those, it's varied from campaigns to board work to, project oriented to, I've got a background in organizational leadership and leadership. Mm-hmm. So some of that comes forward. And so that's what I also like, is the variety.
So in a moment, I do want to talk about board work. I want to talk about leadership. I mean, in our pre-conversation discovery interview, whatever you want to call it, you and I just talked about diversity in boards and just the need for so long. And I want to get into that. But first, I kind of want to talk about your why and your start. Was there a moment that you're like, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do? Or tell me a little bit about why you're so engaged in helping organizations and boards and diversity and all these things we're going to talk about today.
Well, great. So I come from higher education. I worked first in student life for about 12 years or so. And then I moved into alumni and development, where I stayed for about a little over 20 years. And in that time, they were at different institutions, some small liberal arts colleges for the most part, or independent. And I really enjoyed that, particularly because colleges and these schools, are educating what I consider future leaders. And so I think that what we can raise in terms of scholarships, in terms of some of these other, or the ability to expand the faculty and research, whatever that might be, is something that I feel like I'm a part of that is educating for the future. I always tell people I see myself as an educator. They look at me like, what? And I said, yes. I said, I am in education and I chose to be in that area. And I'm able to do that through raising philanthropic support for organizations, educating donors, educating the people with whom I'm working in general. So for me, after having done that for a while, I had two experiences. One was at Smith College, where shortly after I arrived there, we did a strategic plan and hired a consultant and worked very, very closely with her. I'd been on other campus strategic plans for the whole campus, but in this part, this was about the area that I, had responsibility for. And so I worked with this woman named Susan, and I just learned so much from her in terms of processes. Some of it was very familiar because of some of my background, but there were other things and how she was skilled at moving an organization forward. Because sometimes strategic planning can be a little daunting for people. And then they always worry about, I'm going to have to do that stuff plus what I do. No, but we'll talk about that later. And so it was a good experience working with her. And I found that, I did a presentation with a staff person about our strategic planning at a conference and invited her to participate. So I, really learned so much more in going through that process, and that it was a success. You got to trust the process, and it works. The first year of implementation, this is where one of the times I'm conservative, where I can under promise and over deliver, but nonetheless, in each of the 5 years I was there, our increase in the annual fund went from, we had like $300,000, we had 250,000 added on. So they were significant, and you could see the impact that was making. So fast forward, I went then to another women's college in Virginia, Hollins, and I was able to hire another consultant. And so it was not in the strategic planning area, it was in the general, because it was the first time being the leader as a vice president in an overall organization. And so I hired her to work with me, and also to work with our president. And Karen also was just one of those gems that she's brilliant. I got to learn so much from her that I've, rolled into mine. So where that leads me is that as I was, in my 5th or 6th year as a VP, I really started thinking about what do I want to do next? Where do I want to go? And I felt like I had particularly the Smith and the Hollins, two really phenomenal experiences. And so I sat down with Karen. I said, I'm thinking about doing consulting.
Yes.
She said, you'd be great at it. I said, well, good. I'm glad you think so. So I talked with her for, over a period of several months about it. And she just asked me some really poignant questions for me to think about. And so I reached a point where I decided that's what I want to do, because I can impact more organizations than only one where I'm working. And it allowed me to do that thing. So it allowed me to take what I was learning from each of these clients to the next place, or, some things that they were doing in terms of their best practices, and not necessarily copying it, but to give it depth and how would it work here, or would it work here? So I just really love that. I learn constantly with my clients. Sometimes I wish I didn't learn some of the stuff I learned, but no, I'm just joking. But that's what really motivated me. And I really love what I do. People keep asking, when are you going to retire? And I said, I don't know. When people stop hiring me, I guess. But I said, I just love what I do.
I really love that as well. And we don't have to triple down on some of these things that you learned that you kind of wish you didn't know. But right. I kind of want to touch on that. It doesn't have to be a specific company or specific example.
Right.
But what are some of these issues you find in organizations? What is their Achilles heel? What is their struggle? What are these organizations not doing, or what should they, like, when you go in, give us one of these disaster scenarios, or give us a trend. Is there a disaster scenario that comes up all the time?
Well, I think the common thread that I find in organizations, even those that have been really effective, et cetera, is the relationship of the board is one that I think is not always thought about in raising philanthropic support, and the role that boards play. And so one of the very first things I do is I interview all of the board members individually. Now, I know what the organization has told me they want me to do. I want to now interview the board members
right.
and see what they think we want to do. And they really, I feel like they've been very truthful and honest about it. And so sometimes there's greater discrepancies than others, but there's still a piece of what boards don't necessarily understand in terms of what they have responsibility for as being governance. They're the ones that have the 501, responsibility. So you set tuition. Well, you want the advancement office to set a goal, but you need to be a part of that setting because you're the ones responsible for getting this. So the board, and there's been various, from, are you kidding me? You never had any idea that your annual gift was important to, seriously, I was asked that one time. I didn't know I had a gift. And I was just like, oh my gosh. To, board members who have worked on other nonprofits or their college or something. And well, here's the way we did it there. Here's the way we did it here. Or I want us to do this. I want us to do that. And it's like, stop. We're not that organization.
Right.
And I'll listen. And we'll talk about how, so when it happens, I try to get a broader audience to talk about what we need to be doing and how we need to be doing it. So that is another aspect of boards that I often, are raised. And then the relationship with the staff and sometimes the vice president, the relationship with the staff, with the vice president and his or her relationship with their president. Sometimes those are, I think of them as the three, like a stool. There's a staff, the vice president. Well, actually, no, excuse me. There's a vice president, the president, and the board. And sometimes it feels like the chair is just about ready to turn over because they're not necessarily all in sync. It's amazing the things that between vice presidents and between presidents and boards, a real lack of transparency in many cases. I think that's changing now, but how do we want the board to behave? Here are the agenda items that you give. And it's like, no. We work with the board leadership to develop the agenda, following a strategic plan and alignment. How do we do that? I really believe that these organizations are volunteer led. staff supported, and that it should be a really constructive relationship. And so I guess that would be the third piece of the puzzle.
Having that constructive relationship. And
Mhm.
I'm wondering, so listeners might be coming from all different areas. They could be part of a board and being like, we're the best, everyone should mimic us. But then they could be part of a board and be like, I see some of these issues in my team and in our leadership. Or maybe they aren't in a leadership role yet and they see issues with leadership and it might be a red flag for them.
Mhm.
What can we all do? I know that's like casting a very, very large, but like, what can we all do? Is there certain things that we can do
Mhm.
as individuals, no matter what role we're in, to ultimately strengthen leadership, to strengthen these conversations, to create, those cohesive relationships? What can we do? What can I do as a person?
Well, ironically, just recently I talked with a board member of an organization who wanted to talk with me. This is a person that's been on many, many boards,
Hmm.
been chair of boards, has done remarkable work. Our community should be very thankful. And as she started her time on that board, she this isn't the way I've seen boards work. And she had gained some confidence with another board member, and they chatted, and he agreed. That's always a good sign when you're not feeling like I'm outside of this framework for right now. So I think that sometimes board members, if they see that in their own organization, either, I don't know, it can be anything from like, why are the staff doing all these things?
Mm.
The strategic, which is really what we do, we collaborate with them, but they don't set the agendas and send them out, kind of thing. And many boards, we tend to not stay on strategy.
Mm.
When you develop a strategic plan, you usually have anywhere from 3 to 5 what I call pillars. They typically are things about faculty, academic development, enrollment is always one, advancement is usually always one, and then new programs. And, so you've got these pillars, and what you're supposed to do is stay at that level.
Mm-hmm.
And, learn about enrollment, now a lot more about enrollment and what that means. But you're not talking about the application, for example, or you're not, the president who hired you, the board hired the president, and you need to leave it with the president to delegate and lead that team. You don't need to approve everything that is done in the advancement area. You don't need to approve a solicitation letter, for gosh sakes. So it's keeping people on strategy that I think is important. And how you do that, I think in this case, I was just talking about two of the people, one was bold enough to, not ask openly, but to kind of navigate because the experience was there, and to then figure out how you can, what is it that you're wanting to do? And are there others that believe that? Mm. And when you think you've got a sufficient number, I think if the chair of the board has not already been involved in the discussion, certainly needs to be before it you never want it to get out to the president before anything. So I think that you can, as a board member, you have that responsibility, I believe. And I think with staff, after you do your strategic plan and you align what you're doing, you align your resources. And so from there, if one of the pillars is advancement or giving, philanthropy, then as the VP or something, then it's my job with the staff and our volunteers to then look at how we measure success, how we do our goals, how do we meet them, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that some of the staff don't really understand that. They may not have worked in an organization with a strategic plan. I've been when I ask about a strategic plan, oh yeah, we have one, but we don't pay attention to it. I'm like, stop. We need to talk about that.
Yeah.
The process may have been flawed, which, they all are at some extent. So I think that where the issue comes is that not all the board members, and sadly it's less than more, and not all the staff really understand their respective roles. One is not to micromanage the staff, and staff is not to jump how high you want a board member to tell you to jump. So there has to be to develop that constructive relationship. There has to be some conversations, maybe some training. There'll be different, you'll have to assess what it is that needs to be done. But if you don't really get the board, the president, and the advancement team working together and understanding those roles, and you may have to change as you evolve in your strategic plan or something, things may change, but you always come back and redefine that. And you use that when you're recruiting board members.
So I want to get into board member recruitment in a moment, but I want to simplify this and see if I understood this. So we have pillars, and these are basically non-negotiables. These are the things that drive our board, drive our company. Then we create the strategic plan, and then there's things like execution and correct me completely at the end here. Okay. Execution and resources. This can change based on the resources we have and the people we have, but we need to stick to the pillars as like a non-negotiable and basically mold. Can we change our strategic plan? Or you almost butted in there. Tell me a little bit about what I might have missed.
I would reverse it and say you start with the strategic plan.
Got it.
Because that process involves all of your stakeholders.
Got it.
Everywhere from in higher ed, it's everywhere from your alumni to your parents, to faculty, to board members, to alumni association. It involves all those stakeholders that come together and work on, there's obviously there's a process to follow, and we follow that. And so by the time you get to the end of the process, you have reevaluated your mission and priorities. And yes, they are that. Or if you're wanting to change it, you may need to change your mission based on what you've learned. And you don't just change it overnight. Has to be really good reason that you're doing that. So after the strategic plan, that then puts forth, usually, like I said, 3 or 4 pillars. It may be enrollment. It may be faculty, new academic programs. They're large. They're very large, and they're very strategic. So the leadership of those, for example, the faculty would go with the vice president for academic affairs and his or her, deans and getting out to the faculty. I mentioned earlier about advancement and how that would work, so that we're really still at a higher level. And we do then what we call a SWOT analysis. And from that, looking at the PEST, the political, economic, social, and technology. And we look at that internally. We look at them externally as well. Internally, we look at performance and really all data. External is these PEST areas that I'm talking about. And so when you go through those exercises, you begin to find where things line up. And is this really going to stand the test of time? Are we really, maybe we need to reframe one of those pillars, or maybe we need to not, maybe that really goes here or there. So that by the time you've finished your strategic plan, you've really involved many, many people, like I said, all of your stakeholders. And from there, then, if I'm the academic VP, provost or VP, we know what some key issues are. And so then as that leader, you work in the academic area on those issues and develop, whether it be increased salaries, whether it be creating, new academic programs based on trends, or you may have a program, but it really needs to boost, you need to boost enrollment. So that's where then their team does that. And then that keeps coming forward, and you have markers around benchmarks and things of that sort that you assess yourself because the environment changes. I mean, that process of external and internal is called an environmental scan. And so looking at all those issues and the good grief, if I had a strategic plan that was, 3 years old, it'd be a lot different today, because the environment changes and it impact, no one is an island, something like that. And so that's really critical. That would be the essence of it. And that's where staff then on the staff side do the same thing. Is our alumni program in good order or not? Is the annual giving, look at the different components and what are we missing? What are we doing well? What needs to change? What needs to drop? And we work at that with the staff and with volunteers who serve in some of those capacities. So I think that is just otherwise you're just right on.
Got it. And okay, so let's dive into this situation and to kind of just give a situation here and you can jump in. So we've been tracking our progress. Things have been great for 10 years. Our organization is doing this environmental scan and, an organization that worked great 10 to 20 years ago might have some serious issues today. And
Absolutely.
we can even cut this out, not keep it. The one tough question I want to ask you is, from your experience, does the Good Old Boys Club exist? Is this an actual issue? What's going on in that these boards are not doing this environmental scan? Is this an actual issue? What's going on? How do we solve it?
Yes, it would be an issue because I don't know how an organization 10 years ago can be the same organization today. There's just way too much that's happened and changed. Students are this is not even the pandemic. This was just, they weren't 10 years ago. So are you doing online classes just for starters? And so it is a, strategic plan, and why you then track and you assess where you are. When you finish it, you put benchmarks, usually at least 5 years. And so, for example, in the annual fund at Smith, we had 3 pillars. One was to increase the annual fund, to get to 10 million each year. One was to increase donors. We were somewhere around 40%. We wanted to be at 45%. And then the third area was to increase what we call our leadership circle, those that give at least 1,000 or 10,000 each year. Well, we mapped out where we were financially with what we had reached goal-wise and what it would take, how soon would we get to 10, to 10 million. And so we mapped it out what we expected. And then each year we measured that and what worked, what didn't work. Don't tell me we just dropped down. Please don't tell me that one. And did we increase our retention rate? Did we increase those individuals that were willing to step up from a $500 gift to $1,000 gift? You check all your data, and you have to do that every year. And otherwise, your strategic plan doesn't mean anything because you want to have meaningful goals that come from this. And when people tell me that, I remember back in the day, I'd have annual fund people say that, well, I have to increase my goal by 10%. And I said, you did tell your vice president that he or she was crazy, didn't you? And so you got to be realistic about it. So I think those are, that's how it works. And if there's significant change, if there's, I don't know if there's a scandal with the president, if there's a scandal with the board, if there's, theft or, just any of those kinds of things, that's it. Stop and let's, what caused that? How did this happen? And how does this fit? Because those are things that when you're doing your strategic plan, you try to think as much ahead as you can by benchmarking, by data, et cetera, benchmarking with other institutions. And you do your best at getting those, touch points. And if you're not doing it, you have to then really stop and reassess. It doesn't mean that you still don't want to get to 10 million by X year. You just may have to alternate based on data and based on these trends that are happening around you.
Got it. You alternate based on the trends, and this really ties into my higher level question of recruitment and bringing in the right people. Let's say there is a scandal with the president, the board isn't running well. How do we find good people? How do we recruit good people? How do we know who's good for a board? How do we know who's good for leadership?
Yeah. Well, for starters, as a board, and particularly if I were the board chair, I would go look to a consulting firm that had dealt with this and bring them in.
Right.
Because who are they going to lean to? And, there are consultants that do this kind of work, crisis management. And so you can bring those people in to help stabilize the board so that when you do go to recruitment, you may need to wait a year. You may need to ask, they don't all go off at the same time, but maybe those that are going off, you ask to extend a year just because of the circumstances. So there's multiple ways that you can do that part. And then in terms of that recruitment, you can look at your strategic plan and look at those pillars, and that should give you a good idea of the kind of skill set, competency that we want in our board and need to do that consistently. And when we do that, there's a process that we use, and it identifies all different kinds of characteristics, age, gender, racial, ethnic, as well as, but what kind of background you want people to have. And, you fill them out, the board adds or subtracts from it. And then you end up with a profile of that member, of who that members should be. And if you're doing it correctly, you have identified into what we call the portfolio of potential board members that people have identified over the last 3 or 4 years. And so is this the right time? But what I think is important is before you go out and ask, just because, Ben knew this one person that had an ad agency and thought that would be good. Well, I can tell you what Ben's going to keep doing is talking about the ad agency and marketing. And we need him to talk about a bunch of other things as well. So I think that we need to then look where the holes are based on the strategic plan. And there's an article that I wrote a number of years ago on diversity with boards. Because this is one of my favorite topics, and next to governance. And so you want to, someone will always say, we need to get diversity and, inclusion. Well, back then it was diversity, and then we came an inclusion, and then, kind of keeps moving. So, there really are people who understand, construction, enrollment, et cetera, that are people of color. And so you need to look for people in that pool to bring in. And who knows who, and ideally, some of them already because they've been within the organization, they've been donors, et cetera. And so I think you want to spend time talking with them about, I'm not coming to you to talk about, I'll give you an example in a second.
Sure.
You want to talk with them about what it is they can contribute and what the board is looking for them to contribute. So several years after that, higher ed was really on a bent about, diversity and, whatever. And so there was an article that I was reading, and a man named, I can say it because it's a public article. This man, he's a person of color, and his name is John. I'll just say that. And so he wrote in this, article I was reading, because I wanted to do an update. How far have we come? And I can just give you the answer, not far at all. We were still predominantly white, and we're still predominantly men. And so what happened with him, he said he had gotten like, I don't know, 12 invitations to serve on a board. These boards wanted to talk with him. So he threw out over half of them because it's like, no, I'm not involved in that. They don't even know who I am. But there were some organizations that he was interested in. He shares a story that when the board member, contacted him and reached out to him that would like to talk with you about this, the fact that they didn't know him should have been the red flag right there. And so met with him and said, our goal is to increase diversity and inclusion, and we wanted to talk with you about it. Well, John said, that's, I learned to end the meeting real quick at that point. Never did the board member ask, what is it that, here's what we know about you and what you bring to the table. Here's the area, you're a banker. We want, we're interested in our endowment, and in your expertise. No, it was just that you're Black and we want you. And so, there's that kind of tokenism that they think just because they've got one or two Blacks on the board, it doesn't work, that it works. And so I think that's a very informed, it came from someone. And I know I've talked with many of my friends and colleagues who are of color, and we've had these conversations going on for 20, 30, 40 years. So if you want to truly add diversity and inclusion to your board, I recommend that a board, before they go out and start thinking about that, I think that they need to hire a consultant to do an internal assessment of the board's makeup and what their talents, what they bring to the table are. And what a board chair and a president need to do is be very 110% on board. Because what's going to happen is that Black, brown, of other color, and women have been marginalized, and they make decisions differently. They're much more inclusive in their decisions. They're much better at making relationships with people, regardless of color or gender. Those are just some of the givens, for example. And so when you have that, and the board has operated, boom, 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 we vote and, there's no really substantive conversation, the conversation is going to change. And it's going to cause a lot of the traditional white and more men to be uncomfortable in that conversation because that's not the way they've been raised. Some have become enlightened, which is great, and seriously are. Others try to play the card and aren't. And then others are just, I'm white. Why we did it 10 years this way? Why can't we do it this way? Or why can't you just let me call up my friend Joe and have him build the next building on campus? So it's going to be uncomfortable for the board, and the board needs to really understand that. And I think that's where an audit on diversity and inclusion comes first, so that they can see where these gaps and holes are, and that they can begin to understand how do we achieve recruitment with these individuals? What do we as a board need to know? For the facilitator and for some of the board members, they just have to really tolerate. They have to listen and understand if this is a commitment of theirs, that not everybody else shares that. And they're going to probably say some really stupid things. Just don't, want to reach across the table and, grab with the neck or something. Yeah. So I think that if diversity and inclusion is, and it should be, by the way, a priority. As I told the president of a college where I worked one time, when she wanted to bring on the board some women of color. And she said, but I know that they're not financially going to be able to meet our goal. And I looked at her and I said, why not? And but that's where she said that.
That was her statement.
That was her statement. And I had to like take a breath and not want to leap across and strangle her. But I said, my experience is that of the many alumni that I've met, which was intentional on my part to not just go and meet with all white alumni, and to develop relationships, is there's several women who are vice presidents of large corporations. They can make those kinds of gifts. She said the same thing about wanting to bring on graduates of the last 10 years. I said, you do know that one of our leading donors, one of our leading person of wealth, is 3 years out of college. So I just really tried to help her see that those are just such fallacies from so long ago. And so that's what we have to really work through. And boards have to really begin to understand that. And that the conversation is going to be very different. There's a very different mindset, which I actually think is terrific. The more different mindsets,
yes,
better we make decisions. And it may take time, but the results are much stronger. And you've also had a board that's really developed as a team because they've gone through a lot. And when you go through a lot, you spend a lot of time listening to this and helping each other be educated. So I think that it has to be intentional. The board, like I said, I just think a board needs to really hire a consultant at the beginning to help the board understand what they're really going to. Not, I want this Black man on my board, and I can't even tell him where I want him to be serving.
It's kind of like going to a doctor to diagnose an issue you're having internally rather than just going to WebMD and trying to diagnose it yourself. You want a professional to go in, interview the board members, figure out what the issue is. I think it's really important. There's almost 3 categories you pointed out. There's people that are enlightened. I'd add a category of people that are going towards enlightenment. Okay. There's the people that are just playing the card because that's what they're supposed to do. And then there's the people that want to do things the way they've been done for 20 years and they're completely not even open-minded. And it seems like the first 3 categories, even the playing the card category, these people can pivot. They can change.
Yes.
They can learn. But we need diverse, different point of views and we need time and we need teamwork to make that possible. And I think that's insight not just for boards. That seems like it's insight for any organization
Correct.
At all in the 2020s, right?
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. When I first started working, and we would be hiring a annual giving assistant director of annual giving, the questions would be about how much had they raised, what had they done, what did they change, what did they, blah, blah, blah. And looking at their skill sets. And I realized later that I didn't need the skill sets. I needed the attributions that these people had. I needed to learn about how to interview for judgment, how to interview for, open-mindedness, how to interview for, these attributes, because I can't teach those.
No.
I mean, I guess maybe if I pulled you away and for like 3 years worked with you, I could do that, but that's not really the way it happens.
It's hard to teach those attributes.
Exactly.
To someone who doesn't want to learn them.
Well, especially if they don't want to do that. So I like to hire for attributes.
Right.
And then I tell people, we can teach you the skills. If you've never run an annual giving program, we can teach you that. Because what I'm banking on is that those attributes probably in 1 or 2 sit downs on the annual fund, for example, they got it because we're all humans. All human beings want to make a difference. And, I'm always amazed at people. And I say to myself, or when I walk out the room, I'm going, did they not take Psych 101? Do they not know what motivation is? Motivation is the why of behavior. If you don't know how to assess someone's motivation, start with asking them. Okay. And then build on that. That is good in philanthropy. That is good in, owning a business. Those are good. I think that if you've got some of these attributes, you may not be able to articulate it as well at the beginning, but you get it and you're much faster at learning. So I'm more on the one that I'll hire for attributes. Yeah. And I think that that's what we've got to do in organizations.
I want to put an exclamation point on that. And pardon me, I don't know the specific example, but I've heard multiple examples just like this, where there's a college football player. He's very good, top 50, but not top 10. And one of the things the scouts are looking for is in those post-game interviews, in the huddle, in these scenarios where there's conversation, there's leadership, maybe they just won the game ball and everyone's praising them for their skills. Are they saying, yeah, I'm the best, I work out 5 times a day, I get all the girls? Or do they say, as a team, we were able to operate this play, I'm only as strong as my weakest link, and we don't have a single weak link in our team? When players answer questions like that, these scouts and these coaches know this player has the attributes that even if they don't have the most skills on the field, they have the attributes that they can come into our team and be successful. And I think in athletics, business boards, it seems like that's the number one thing we should be looking for, right?
Thank you.
Did we nail it?
So you did. Yes. I mean, yes, absolutely. Sadly, so much depends on the coach. So much depends on the coaches.
Right.
Even the coaches that aren't there, if this is college ball, even the coaches that these young men did when they were 10 years old, what kind of a coach did they have?
Sure.
And so, if they've not had a good one that's, knock them down, blah, blah, blah. You have to do a lot of retraining. Okay.
Right.
And so it's possible, I think, because it's more like because it's a concentrated period of time that you're together, unlike so many other things that you're doing at college. So I think that coaches then really influence that and what they recognize and how they, yell and scream at someone, but also give someone praise. You've got to balance, berating someone is, right. I don't know that there's been any motivation from that, except probably to quit. So they do matter. And I've seen in some of the football games this season, NFL, not that I don't watch it all the time, but occasionally I'll turn on the TV and there's it is, and I'll just watch it. So I've seen, some quarterbacks this year, when interviewed, they talk about the team. Right. Tom Brady, any interview he does always starts with a team. He always starts with a team. And, you don't take the Buccaneers from a losing season to win the Super Bowl, and you only started in November without being a team. Right. I mean, the things this man, I read an article. I mean, he texts, each of the team members, if it's their birthday, if they're, what he's got a key memory, and he texts them and, invites them over with their families. I mean, he does these things that build team on and off the field. And there's other players like that, that are starting to do that. And that for me is huge. When you can take, especially the NFL, you can take a bunch of NFL players, right? And it's not me first, but team. That's, as far as I'm concerned, we're onto a really good thing in this society because they're so beloved, and everybody just they follow them. They buy their shirts, they buy their paraphernalia. Well, if they see them constantly talking about team, maybe that will begin to change some of the craziness of
I
the
agree.
sport.
I agree. And so I love sports. I love music. I love
Mm,
basically all things, right? But
yeah.
I like looking at sports. I'm the guy who's like looking at the sociology of the body language and the
Uh-huh.
psychology of,
Right.
I dive way deeper than anyone should. But what it all comes down to is e- economy aside, capitalism aside, what these people are getting paid aside, the reason they are so successful and so talented at what they do
Mhm.
are the things we're talking about, the attributes
Right.
we're talking about today. Money aside, because in a lot of cases they make way too much.
Well,
The market does pay them that. But money
mhm.
aside, how do you think Tom Brady became where he was? It wasn't from cutting corners. It
No,
was
not at all.
it
No.
was from being a leader and being a team player and being driven and wanting to take his team and his organization to the next level. So that's a big takeaway for me today, Cynthia.
Good. Good. You got it. So I think that's where I think that, understanding the process of human motivation and human development, if you can fundamentally get that,
Hmm.
you're really in a very, very good situation. And people want to follow you, whether you're the designated leader or not. They seek
Right.
these people out in
Yes.
organizations. Um, there's been research in advancement on retention, and the two things that lead about why people leave. One is that my boss didn't give me chances at professional development. And two, my boss didn't invest in me in mentoring and talking with me and doing those kinds of things. That's why they left. Those are the two big reasons. And I think so, supervisors, here's a Psych 101 book, here's the class, go
Hmm.
to it.
Hmm.
Then come back and we'll see if you've improved.
Mm.
Uh, like I said, you can, once you know that, I think, I'm not sure I can run the United States. Let me put it that way. But nor would I want to, by the way. But I would feel competent to move into other fields besides what I'm in,
Hmm.
which I don't want to do. But because of the philosophy, because of the mentoring that I've had, and the really good fortune of working with good people, and sometimes the fortune of working with not so good.
Hmm.
I had to terminate a man that was using an old credit card for his own benefit. That was really fun. Only to have his wife, before he could even he got escorted out of the alumni house by the campus police, only to then have his wife call me and just, rail me out. Anyway, and campus police literally had to follow me for a week because they were scared that something
Wow.
might happen to me.
Right.
And so, there's, and there's a couple of other, but of the institutions where I've worked, of the number of staff I've worked with, it's rare that it gets that dramatic.
Hmm.
That I always think the best way, if we have performance plans that the staff member and the uh, supervisor have agreed upon, and if they're meeting at least quarterly to review their performance plans, and if they're not meeting it, it's behavior, and it's a whole lot easier to talk with someone about, not, this may not be the right fit,
Hmm.
or this may not be the right time, or here's a position that I think might be better for you or be more effective with you. But even terminating, I always want people to walk out knowing that they were
Right.
cared about. I have a friend of mine that when she terminated someone, he sent her a dozen roses the next day and thanked her for
For her service
telling
to
him
the, yeah.
what he needed to hear.
Wow.
I know, we all tease her. So did you get, when she said something about, years later, she had to terminate a step. Did you get roses? But anyway.
So I want to close out with rapid fire.
Oh, okay.
I joke about this. So I ask people all the time, we should do a round two. We probably should do a round two, but I haven't started round twos yet.
Okay.
But when I do, we'll come back because obviously we could go for another hour easily.
Right.
Um,
Happy
I've
to.
I've got one big question to ask you, but I want to end on it. So we're going to do
Okay.
rapid fire
Right.
and fill in the blank. Honestly, there's no points, there's no scoring.
Yeah.
It's like Family Feud that it's fast
Right.
paced, but I like to say it's like whose line is it anyway that the points don't matter.
Right.
Totally subjective to you.
Right.
Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Beer or wine?
None of them. I'm a water drinker.
Water is the number one fill in the blank answer, so
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Okay.
Cats or dogs? You got one with you?
Dogs.
Oh, quiet dogs.
Behind me. Yeah. Dogs.
Well, you said she?
Yeah, I've got a she and a he. They're Cairn Terriers. Actually, Shakespeare was 15 yesterday. He looks like Toto. And Lily Grace is going to be 8 in January. And she's more blondish color. So they're fun.
I love it. And so quiet. Usually when the dog's in the room, I hear, "Ruh, ruh," or I hear,
Well, if
obviously
someone
not
would be
loud.
walking
Yeah.
by on the street, they would have been doing that. So I guess I would thank people for not being out. Go ahead.
I want to do one more.
Uh-huh.
Favorite season?
Oh, you know what? I love 4 seasons. I grew up in 4 seasons in the Midwest, and I love all 4 of them. If I had to pick, which is what you're asking me to do, I would go with summer. I would go with summer because it allows me to be outdoors a lot more. And I love the outdoors. I love to, see all the beauty of wherever I am. Mhm.
And summer in Rochester, New York's not summer in Tucson, Arizona. So we've got the perfect summer weather here.
Yes, exactly. I guess I'd have to delineate summer, but I would have to determine where it was.
Yes, yes. But yeah, summer in Rochester is beautiful. What else? So how do people keep in touch with you? What's the best way to reach out? Is it email? Is it LinkedIn? Is it phone call? Is it just view the website, fill out the contact form? What should be my step to reach out to Cynthia?
Well, I would say just about all of the above.
Okay.
I do have a website that has information about the organization and some things that might be helpful for people to look at as they consider calling me. Call me. I answer my phone. I mean, if I'm not, I return calls very promptly. I do emails, still do emails. I can do text. Let me think.
So anyway.
Pardon? Just about any
You're responsive.
way. LinkedIn is another good way with messages. So
I always put the LinkedIn, and I'll put your website in the show notes as well, so they can get your email, phone number, all from that website. Or it sounds like you're on LinkedIn, so they can connect with you there and say hello as well.
Right. So people often. A lot of my work is reference based because I've been very fortunate that some of the organizations I've worked for, I've gone back to. Mm-hmm. And then some of them, the person that was there at the time has gone to another institution and they will ask me to come. I just got a request for a proposal from a independent school that I worked with 12 years ago. Mm-hmm. And and just about almost all of the staff has changed. Wow, yeah. But some of the former board members and had known me. And so they had suggested, because I did a lot of board work with them. So it's really kind of interesting in that way.
I want to ask you one more question before I let you go. Just because before the call, you said you loved this one, and I was super curious the entire conversation. I didn't get to ask it. So you get to have sit down, have dinner, and just have a conversation with 3, 4, 5. You get to basically pick the table. It's a dinner table. Okay. You don't have to buy, though. Or maybe you do buy. But the whole point here is that you get to sit down and have dinner with 3, 4, 5 people, live or dead. Who do you want at that table? Well,
if I had realized sitting down at my dinner table, I could have 8. So there you go. But I didn't do 8. So I wrote down Jesus, I wanted to learn and deepen my faith and share it with others. And I keep saying that he's probably one of the best. He is the best at understanding people and humanity and serving the least of these. So I think that there's a lot packed into that, and a lot of lessons that we can learn from that. I said some of the early suffragette leaders. Of course, we've got Susan B. Anthony here in Rochester, but there's others of them from the early days fighting for the women's right to vote, and just reading about several of them. I was a women's study minor, and recognizing what they were going through with their life, to do this. I mean, they were viewed as property, not as a human being. Right. So that determination and stamina I just can't even fathom. But I'd like to learn more. I'd like to have some of that here. And then some early civil rights leaders, such as, MLK, John Lewis. There's, others that I can, rattle off too. But I think there's a lot in that area that is of importance to me. And then I said, Tina Turner.
Okay.
I love her music. Yeah. I love her legs, and her energy are just amazing.
Yeah.
She does Rolling Down the River. Oh my gosh. And I've actually seen her in concert. And honestly, her ability to overcome obstacles in the early years of her time with her former husband and just family stuff. I mean, it's just remarkable how she has faced those, and I think is a real inspiration to many. So those are the ones I came up with.
I think you should fill every single seat, all 8 seats. It's going to be an incredible dinner. Everyone's going to learn so much. If I don't get a seat at the table, I'll just kind of peer from the living room and listen in.
Right. But that's fine. I'll think of 3 more, or 4, because I'm one of the 8. 3 more I'll try to think of, and maybe next time we talk, I can give you those 3 or something.
Yeah. Well,
because it's hard. It was hard to limit, because there's so many people of inspiration. I mean, I think of, Albert Einstein. I think of Maria Curie. There's so many people. Like, you could just start with the Nobel Prize winners, for example, and, do that. So I think it's the intellectual curiosity that is important in our lives. And so that question is a very good one.
The intellectual curiosity. Beyond that, I like Tina Turner as an answer. Someone else answered Bruce Springsteen at a different episode. At the end of the day, like, just being able to sit down with these legendary people and sharing, conversation with them. Oh my gosh, I don't even know where I'd start. I just have my jaw on the ground and just listen the entire time. But I don't want to digress too much. It's been fun.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
Thanks for taking the time today, Cynthia. We'll do it again.
You got it. I appreciate it very much, Ben. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Rochester Business Connections. Don't forget to share this, rate, and comment on your favorite platform. You can also email me, ben@balbertmarketing.com. Let's connect soon. Until then, keep thriving, everyone.